Premiere Pro has four types of setting. You've got settings for your sequence, which don't allow you to do that much once you've started editing. It's under the, just select the panel under the sequence menu here. Most of the stuff's grayed out, but you do have the option to change the way temporary files are created to show your effects, your video previews. Then you've got project settings, which again don't really let you do that much, but you can specify with them where temporary files will go. So recorded video and audio, and also the video and audio previews. Then you've got, under the edit menu, your keyboard shortcuts. There are many keyboard shortcuts available, and a lot of them are not mapped by default. And what I've found very often is there might be a function within Premiere Pro you think is missing because the keyboard shortcut isn't connected. If you have a quick look under the keyboard shortcut settings and just search for the thing you want, maybe it's a trim shortcut of some kind, just start typing it in at the top here and you'll see a list of every option that matches that text. Anything to do with trimming at all in this case, just type it in and you'll see the option here. The bulk of the options, though, are under the Edit menu, under Preferences, and you have a series of different kinds of preference available. It doesn't really matter which one you choose first of all, because you'll see the list is available inside the Preferences panel anyway. I'd like to take a moment to just highlight a few of the settings here that are particularly important. As you develop your familiarity with Premiere Pro and perhaps with nonlinear editing in general, you'll find that your needs are increasingly specific. There'll be things that you just find yourself thinking, there must be a way for me to do this thing in a single click or with a single button press. And that's at the sort of time that you'll come looking in these preferences. The first one I want to jump in with is memory. Now, many people who use Premiere Pro don't fully understand this setting, and it's important to use it properly. The only thing you can really check, well, there's two things you can change. One is the amount of RAM reserved for other applications, and the other is whether renders will be optimized for performance or for the amount of memory you have. Now, just to deal with this option first of all, if you are short of memory, if you've got maybe 2, 3, or 4 gig of memory, you might want to set this to memory, and you'll find the machine is generally more responsive and you'll have a better experience. If you've got upwards of, say, 6 gig, 7, 8 gig of memory, I think I'm working with 16 on this machine, you might as well set this to performance. It's really in your interest to get the maximum out of the playback by setting this to performance. When you set it this way, Premiere Pro is going to make bigger files in the memory on the computer, in the RAM, which is less efficient in terms of the amount of memory, but more efficient in terms of playing back and showing you your videos. Now, just for the record, memory is kind of misnamed as a computing term. We think of memory as recalling information, and technically that is what's happening, but we're thinking more in terms of long-term memory. For computers, memory, also known as random access memory, is much closer to our consciousness. It's the things the computer's got in mind right now at any given moment. It's very, very fast, much faster than, if you like, by analogy, the long-term memory that you've got on your hard drive. Everything your computer does requires memory, just as everything you do requires some degree of consciousness, although I can't say for certain for myself first thing in the morning. Now, if you set the RAM reserved, the random access memory reserved for other applications to 0 gigabytes, you could understand that you might think, well, I want the maximum amount of memory to be given to my editing software. Well, that's going to be a problem because Windows or Mac OS, they both require a certain amount of memory in order to function. And if you set this figure to 0, then you're forcing everything the operating system does to use the swap file. Now, the swap file is a file, a very large file on your hard drive that pretends to be RAM. Because computers, well, they just can't run out of RAM. It's as simple as that. They just can't. So if they do, I suppose it's like falling asleep at work. The machine must have more RAM if it needs it, and so it uses hard drive space to get things done. You'll know if you have this memory option set wrong because the computer will be incredibly slow for no particular reason. My advice is set this to at least 2 gig. You can click and drag this setting, or you can click and type, and it's the same right the way across all the creative applications from Adobe. Anytime you see orange numbers with an orange underline, you can click and drag or click and type. In my case here, I've got this set to 5 gig, and I've still got 11 gig left over for After Effects, Premiere Pro, Encore, Prelude, the Media Encoder, and Photoshop. Notice that all of these applications share the same amount of RAM. In fact, they will use the remaining system RAM as well if necessary, but they're going to balance it. They're going to allow the other applications to take precedence. This is quite an important setting. Another very useful one under playback is we've got this option. This is a new feature here in CS6 where you can choose which screens are going to get full screen playback of your video. If you're working on 2 screens and you don't need the second one, just tick the box for that screen and all of your video will be displayed on it full screen. This is particularly useful if you have one of the newer computer monitors that has a TV mode, because it'll display the colors differently. Another very useful setting is, of course, autosave. Premiere Pro will save your project file, that's the file that contains all of your creative decisions, automatically and put them in a folder inside the same location as your original project file. So if your project file is called Beach and it's in a folder called Today's Project, inside that Today's Project folder, you're going to have an autosave folder with it, with lots of project files called Beach, along with the date and time in the name. This is extremely useful, and really there's no special reason to have as little as 5 versions. When I'm working on an important project, I'll set this on at least 40 versions. The files are pretty small and they're really just containing shortcuts to things. And it's only really if your hard drive became full that it might be an issue. You could set this to 80 versions if you want. It's not going to be a particular problem for today's modern computers. If you set the autosave very, very short, 5 minutes for example, it's fine, it won't hurt the system, but it is kind of annoying. Especially if you're working on a longer project, it'll pop up an autosave so often you'll want to set this back down to 10 or 15 minutes anyway. Those are probably the main preferences that jump out at me when you're starting out working with Premiere Pro CS6.